G'day, Dr. Carl, Shirtloads of Science, University of Sydney, talking with somebody not from the University of Sydney. Now, let me get this straight. The pronunciation, Professor Marian-Andrei Rizoiu. I don't know, how do I do
that was as close as it gets. It's Marian-Andrei Rizoiu.
So,
Marian-Andrei Rizoiu.
And that's the anglicised version, and the Romanian version?
That was the Romanian version.
That was the Romanian version.
That was the Romanian version. That's what I was saying.
And you've got a wonderful quote. Hit us with that quote about social media.
I was watching a TED Talk the other day from my collaborator and dear friend, Professor Hani Farid from University of California in Berkeley. And Hani was saying towards the end of his TED Talk the following. Social media is the construct of Silicon Valley designed to steal your attention and time by serving you the equivalent of junk food.
So you get mental junk food through social media, and they steal from you your attention and your time. And what do they do with it? Do they turn it into money?
Well, social media platforms are driven by advertisement. That's how they get most of their funding. So therefore, the attention of the individuals on their platforms gets monetized via advertising.
Okay, so that's the first thing, saying social media can do this. Second thing, we're going to be talking about misinformation and disinformation, and you've blown my mind on some of the things that you've written about is just astonishing. And the third thing is this nice little phrase here, fringe groups. So we're talking about people going anti-COVID vaccines and the earth is flat, and etc. That fringe groups often leverage mainstream news sources to propagate or spread out their views, emphasising that the spread of the misinformation, how successful they are, is more about how the content is framed rather than telling lies, than factual accuracy. Wow, this is just so much to deal with, and there are many lies travelling around. So what would you sort of see as the first of your science-based approach to understanding misinformation? And just a bit of background, you've done lots of work, for example, with the Australian military, and who else?
The work in the misinformation environment is been mainly funded by the likes of the Department of Home Affairs, and yes, there's been some funding from Defence Science and Technology Group and other places. And
probably even some from the social media companies themselves.
There's been funding, yes, from social media companies wanting to understand hate speech propagation through online social media in general.
Okay, we'll get to that. So here you say that misinformation is not an information problem, it's a human and societal problem. Can you take me through that? What do you mean by that?
Yes. This is the result of our three-year-long research project into the Australian misinformation environment.
You got a 3-year project?
We had a 3-year project with a very wide remit on understanding the misinformation environment, understanding how topics get to propagate, understanding where do they come from, and try to hint about what we can do, if we can do anything about it. And the story about this particular finding, it's funny that you picked on that, because it's one of the most important findings.
Oh, I found it surprising.
It's super surprising. We went at it with, well, the clue is in the title, misinformation. So we went after the information. We went and we looked in what is being produced in the traditional media. We looked at what's being written, various news outlets, their political orientation, whether they are sympathizers or not of the various the more fringe ideologies, and we couldn't find much. That was very surprising. No matter how we crossed it, whenever we tabulated and then we did statistical testing, we couldn't find statistically significant differences between the various leaning of the producers. That was so surprising. We spent more than 6 months reanalyzing the data, trying to find the error. But we just couldn't find the error. The result was always the same. No matter what you consume for information, no matter which outlet, as long as it is a relatively well-established outlet and respected, and as long as you go onto the outlet's main page, you still get a pretty decent idea of what's happening in the world. So the coverage of the actual news isn't really dependent on the outlet. However, this is where things change. We Because we were, obviously, you can imagine we were a bit frustrated. 6 months, we started with a hypothesis. The hypothesis didn't turn out.
And the hypothesis was?
The hypothesis was that there was a systematic bias, and in the systematic difference in which information was covered, depending on, say, the leaning of the producer, of the producer of the information.
Yep, okay. So the hypothesis was that the misinformation was due to the systematic bias of the type or family of news outlets from which it came.
Right.
That was your hypothesis.
Now, I'm not saying that there is no systematic bias. Biases do exist. What we were measuring information completeness, essentially the details existing in a particular news story. Mm-hmm. Does a news story from a particular news outlet contain all the factual components that are required to be there? Now, when they present, they will give different directions and interpretations. I was more interested in what factual details are present, and we couldn't find significant differences.
Really? So left-leaning, right-leaning, centrist tended to have the same factual details?
The same factual coverage,
really?
In average and when measured with statistical tests, right? So there are obviously there is variation, but there's variation in all of them. There is variation, and we couldn't find systematic differences. However, and this is where I want to get to, we start. Then we asked ourselves, if it's not an information production problem, then what could it be? What if it is an information consumption and information sharing problem?
Consumption? So not from the people broadcasting, but from the people receiving it?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
So what we did, this work comes on top of multiple years of research projects, including the ones from Meta, where we started following social media accounts responsible with either anti-vaccination or anti-climate change opinions and narratives that were pushing in the system.
They're two easy ones.
They were pretty easy, and also we started this research in 2019, 2020, in the wake of the bushfire season, 2019, 2020, and that was on everybody's mind, and right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic and the lockdown. So very, very prolific.
So maybe first 6 months or 9 months of COVID?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
Throughout 2020, but because we work with social media data and we gather the data, we kept gathering the data in real time. And that's where the beauty is. So when we moved, coming back to not the information problem, but the human problem, when we were stuck in our information hypothesis, we asked ourselves, why don't we go back and look what our accounts of interest were sharing and how they were interacting with the content. So what we did, we went to their activity, and then we looked how they interacted with the information that we were looking. So the news articles, and that's where every single indicator that we are building started screaming red.
So was it the consumption end, not the production?
Sharing.
It was the sharing.
It was the sharing by these accounts and by the communities that were involved with conspiratorial thinking and anti-vaccination in this case. Let me step back. For simplicity reasons, let's just say that we have two groups of publishers. Let's say the left publishers and the right publishers. Of course, we looked at multiple denominations, but let's, for simplicity, just take these two. We looked if there is any systematic differences on a number of features, on a number of stuff like information completeness, the structuring of their text, the attitude. And we couldn't really find any significant difference. But then you put on the side or third column, which is articles that are being shared by anti-vaccination and anti-climate change groups. And that's where every single indicator that we were looking, almost every single indicator we were looking at, was deviating significantly for the other two. What does this tell me?
Why? Well, what does it tell you?
They were not just using the left or the right articles. They were using whatever was suitable for them, whatever was at hand. So our running hypothesis, the main finding is, it is not information shaping attitudes, but rather pre-existing mental attitudes and beliefs will shape the information that is being shared and consumed. So it is the other way around, is your pre-existing beliefs shapes what you consume, not the other way around. And the information itself that was linked and used was linked opportunistically. Whatever was there to support their claim. So if it was a left article, a center article, or a right article, they were using it as long as it supported the talking points.
And so they would reframe the story? Could the same article from one particular source be used both by the right and the left simultaneously?
We haven't really looked at for the consumers of the fringe groups, we don't have a left and the right fringe group because we were looking topically at the fringe groups, so the anti-vaccination and the climate change.
Okay, they're the two. Yeah.
But the answer would be yes,
really?
Because they were not even fully reading the article or interpreting the main points of the article. Even just the usage of the article was opportunistic.
Now, you make a point here that it fulfills, these online conspiracy groups fulfill a genuine human need.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Very good point. So, and then we started asking questions, why? Why do we see very different sharing patterns than we see production necessarily patterns? So we started looking into what is the misinformation ecosystem. We coined the term misinformation ecosystem. So we've done that using both computational tools, so by gathering large volumes of data and measuring things, but also we've done it using digital social science approaches. So people that went and they looked deeply into the ecosystem, into what people were discussing, where, what points they made, how did they interact with each other. And what we found is that most of our conspiracy theorists were in fact located into topical groups where they would be discussing these topics. They form genuine online social groups centered around these narratives, these attitudes. Within these groups, and this is exactly coming to your point, within the groups, what we observed is that information that flows inside the group is only information which is aligned with the group existing beliefs. So, and then it's also changed and is mutated, as we just made the point earlier, to suit the existing beliefs of the group. Now, what does this mean? It means that if we are in one of such groups, all the talks and the discussions we see are containing our skewed and biased or pre-existing worldviews. We are only fed this type of views. We are shielded from the alternative views. Add to it the fact that at least half, depending on the age group, up to half of the population actually consumes news from social media from within these groups. What you obtain is that these groups can actually disconnect completely from reality, and they move no matter where part of the information space, because users are essentially shielded from the alternative view. Now, why am I saying they start functioning as fulfilling real social needs? And because those groups, they give users a place to express themselves. They give them validation because they receive the endorsement of their peers. They feel they are in a group of peers.
They're not alone. They're in a group of.
They are not alone.
They're with a group of peers.
Yes, and we all need that. We need the social connection. We need the societal connection. And these groups provide for these individuals these essential needs, of course, at the expense of the information.
But then surely that could mean that with constant reinforcement, the rabbit hole, to use that popular phrase, gets deeper.
It does.
It does.
It does. And it doesn't end there. Enter now the algorithms of the platforms, particularly the recommender engine. Remember how we started with the attention economy?
That was our very first sentence, that social media was invented by Silicon Valley to steal your attention and your time in exchange for the equivalent of junk food.
Well, that's what my friend Hani Farid was saying.
Yeah.
So that essentially is a metaphor towards the attention and the fact that attention is valuable. Our attention on the social media is valuable because it gets monetized. But let's stick on...
Or pushes a political agenda, or causes people to vote a certain way.
The platforms do say that they stay away from this, and then political ads do have their own regulations, and they would respect certain. So I have not seen, within my research, I have not seen any indications that the platforms were part of the shifting. But Does it happen on social media? Well, it's a place where attention gets transacted, and of course there will be players, third-party players that will obviously do it. But let me go back to this attention economy bit. One of the ways that the attention is being reinforced and kept is via the recommender engine. The recommender engine is an AI tool, which purpose is to recommend to you new content that you are likely to engage with and like. So if I am, say, on a platform, Instagram or TikTok, if the flow of content that keeps coming at me is suitable for me, I will stay there. If it starts showing me things I'm not interested in, I'm likely to put it down and go away. So how well the recommender engine works is very relevant for the attention economy. Now, the secondary and perverted effect here is that once you're in the rabbit hole, and you consume information about a conspiracy theory, guess what type of content the recommender engine recommends you?
Tell me.
Well, the one that you're likely to engage with, the conspiratorial content, therefore reinforcing the...
Now, you use the word reinforcement, but you also, in one of your papers, you talk about, let me get the phrase, intermittent reward reinforcement, which is, I think, something they do on the poker machine.
Yes.
So how do they do that in social media? How do they give you this intermittent reward to reinforce that you should stay there?
Very good point. So just the intermittent reward is just one of the schedules. So the problem is very simple. Let's say you take an action regularly, and the question is, how do you give reward and you incentivize the individual to keep doing the action? It can have very good applications, like how do you give incentives or promotion to your employees to keep doing the work they do, which is all the time. You made a reference to poker machines. Poker machines, they use what is called an intermittent reward system, which means even though the action is we regularly pull the handle.
Yeah.
The reward that comes can come at random intervals of time. So you don't really know when your next reward will come. And it turns out that due to how our brains are wired, that is one of the most addictive types of behaviors.
Really?
That's why we are there. And
wow.
That's why it's quite hard to shake up addiction because of these, also because of this. It's not the only reason. Now, you asked the question, what is the similarity? Well, if you think of what we call the infinite feed platforms, like the ones where posts keep coming and you scroll and they never end.
They only end when your battery goes flat. They just keep coming.
For example, that would be one way you stop, or it's morning, or
there's
it's one of those reasons. So the way it works is that we keep scrolling, right? The regular our regular work, and then every now and then there is a piece of content that you genuinely like. There's one content that you enjoy. There is one advice that you like, and that is your intermittent reward. Most of the content in there maybe is average, and then there's the one that stands up. But when will that one come? That is the randomness, and that's one of the reasons why we believe the addiction comes from.
So still following on this science-based approach to understanding misinformation, you got something special to say about people under 16, and you mentioned here that excessive social media consumption can lead to lower mental health outcomes. Have they been measured?
There's an increasing number of studies that came out in recent years. I was recently looking into it. I think the U.S. Surgeon General has stated that consumption of social media of just 3 hours per day on social media, and mind you that the regular teenager stays online at least in average 3.5 hours.
How come their battery doesn't go flat? Don't ask. Okay. Okay, we've got a little charger, yep.
But to finalize, so consuming social media at least 3 hours per day doubles the likelihood of lower mental health outcomes.
Because you mentioned things here such as
depression,
lack of sleep,
anxiety, lack of sleep
is one, and then attention fragmentation. What does that mean? So they can't concentrate on a single thing for a long time?
It does lead to that. It does lead to to not being able to concentrate on a single task. It can lead to difficulties in learning. It can lead to what we would typically diagnose as ADHD, but that's where my expertise actually ends.
Sure. And then social comparisons, such as comparison with impossibly ideal curated online images.
Yes, that is yet another one. So this is part of the list of harms that consuming too much social media leads to anyone, not just the under 16s. I'm going to go back to the under 16s. The impossible ideal comes from our natural tendency to compare to our peers.
Yes.
This is particularly strong in young adults, but we all have it. We all compare. As an academic, I always compare to my peers, and I always have the 1-2 that I secretly envy, but I would like to be like. So these comparisons, they are normal. But when we live in our offline world, we will be comparing to a small, limited pool of individuals that we are in touch every day. Our colleagues, in case of school-age children, will be their classmates. But with social media, we're opening the realm of comparison to everybody out there, and not just everybody out there, but increasingly curated images. We all know the life bloggers that seem to have the perfect life, always traveling to exotic destinations, always enjoying the best of life. And here I am yet again on a Wednesday going to work on a rainy day. They must have such an amazing life. Their posts, their appearances, their whole body image is most often heavily curated and heavily altered, which, as we consume this content, we form the idea that is what successful people have, and therefore what I have is not on par. We are comparing against an ideal so unachievable and so impossible that lowers our self-esteem, happiness.
So Australia is one of the first countries to do the social media ban for people under 16. I've been hearing comments for and against it and difficulties in verifying it and giving away. Can you take us through some of the pros and cons as we head here?
As far as I'm aware, Australia is the first to present legislation around it. Now, that is in terms of social media. There are two main areas where there's been lots of attention recently. And that is social media consumption and then online explicit adult content. Now, there's been a couple of countries that have already legislated the adult content consumption side, so which has very similar issues. But in terms of social media platforms, as far as I'm aware, Australia is among the first to regulate it.
And what do you see as the pros or the cons?
I can talk of both. It seems to be one of these polarizing topics where everyone has an opinion, and we cling to the opinion. But so let me
regardless of data, or there is no data, or there's not.
There is data. There is data. The problem is that there is a lot of unknowns. As it has not been done before, we don't really know what we don't know. We know what we know, but we don't really know what the possible effects will be. Let me table it down. So, in a nutshell, the government is introducing legislation starting from 10th of December 2015, so in a couple of months.
So we're in mid to late 2025. So in December 25, something will happen.
In a couple of months.
Yep.
It is legislated that social media platforms have the obligation to verify the age of people connecting onto their platforms with accounts. So with accounts, we're not talking about anonymous connection or without logging in. So logged in. To log into your account on social media, they need to check that they need to make sure that the age is at least 16.
If you come from Australia?
Of course, for Australia.
But what if you use a VPN and pretend to come from outer Mongolia?
That is always an issue. But what the legislation is really seeking to do is introduce friction. Sure, with a VPN, you can be whoever you want, from wherever you want, but then the moment when you introduce the requirement of the VPN, you introduce what we call friction into the logging in experience, which means that you're going to drop 80-85% of the people likely to be using it without the friction. And anyone who has any parent of such children knows the main issue is that we're fighting, as parents, we're fighting a losing battle. You can't keep your child away from the social media if all of their friends have it. You're essentially I wouldn't call it hurting them, but you are hurting their at least their social life or their perceived social life.
And they're fitting in with their peers.
Right? But if now 80% of the kids are not on social media, Even if I'm a smart cookie and I use a VPN, well, I'm going to be alone with all the guys in the US. Out of my immediate group, there's not going to be as many. So it will still work due to the friction. Now, going back to the pros and cons. The pros are usually based on mental health outcomes. There's an increasing amount of research coming out showing that consumption of social media is actually leading to a number of adverse effects.
When you say consumption, you mean like for 5 minutes or for 3 hours a day, or for... So 5 minutes is different from 3 hours in
Absolutely.
terms of the effect?
It is a continuum. Like with everything, done in moderation is probably not a problem, probably even good, because it exposes us to, and this is the argument against the ban, the fact that with social media we can access support groups, we can access information, we can access things which are not immediately in our immediacy. And one of the ways that they are, one of the groups that is always being put out is teenagers from minority groups that would be disadvantaged otherwise and do not have a readily access. They don't have a ready access to support groups in their immediate offline environment. So they are actually benefiting from social media.
Right.
That's the good.
And
The bad is the things we're discussing about. Anxiety, comparison, attention fragmentation. There's a number of studies that came out, small sample studies, but then we also have access to the first meta studies that go and study across multiple studies.
They're coming through now, are
they are starting to come through, and we see over and over that increased consumption of social media, the more social media is consumed, the worse the impact.
On the younger people? Under 16?
Particularly on the younger people. Okay. The reason why the younger people are particularly exposed is because human brains, they develop well into our 20s. And this particular age between roughly 11 and 18, 11 and 20 is when we require a lot of social interaction. Is when we start is where we form the skills on how to live in groups. We require the interaction. We require friction in our relationships. So we require those conflicts, but we also, because it teaches us how to solve them, and we require an in-person relationship, discussions, spending time. Social media mediates them, and then introduces those impossible standards, plus lack of sleep. And
well, you mentioned ages 11 plus, and it turns out while the adult brain, weighing 2% of the body weight, uses 20% of all the energy at rest, the 10-year-old body, the 10-year-old brain at rest uses 50% of the energy is given to the brain for making and breaking synapses. So at that period, they're gradually dropping their brain rewiring, but they're starting off at a big brain rewiring. But what about a con with regard to theft of identity? Because now you've got somebody who's 14 years old required to give proof of identity, and that proof can be stolen online with a poor security. Is that a problem?
Well, of course, we've seen, particularly in Australia, we've seen quite a number of breaches. So there will always be these danger. But the legislation, this is something that's not widely known, at least in my circles when we discuss about it. But the legislation explicitly forbids the platforms to ask for the ID.
Well, how do they verify you're under 16?
And that is the very good question. There's a number of ways of doing it. One is, I've done my homework. One is a pilot program by the Australian government to manage identity via the exchange of they have a complex term for it, with tokens. Yes, which essentially means the following: I don't give my ID to the company that requires to verify one feature, because they only need to verify only one feature, which is age above 16 or not. It is a true-false outcome that they require, right? In fact, they don't even require access to my ID. They just need a proof that they believe that it is above or under 16, right? So instead of giving the ID to a company, which again cannot be necessarily trusted and so on and so forth, this verification can be done by specialized services where this verification is done, and then we have the technology to make it secure. And these services, these third-party services, only transmit a token, which is just the thumb up.
Yeah, thumbs up, and doesn't give you the name, their age, or their gender. So that's one way around it. Look, there's so much in this. Can I get you to come back for another interview, and we finish on to the second and third parts?
Absolutely. I enjoy being here so much.
So just before we go, how do people follow you? What's the best way to find you? Is it the University of Technology at Sydney or your surname, your unusual surname?
My unusual surname is not helping a lot due to pronunciation, but it helps quite a lot with web searches.
Okay, so it's R-I-Z or Z for our American listeners. Then three vowels in a
and then
row.
3 vowels, yes.
O-I-U or Oscar India Uniform. So are there any other, how do you pronounce it?
Rizoiu.
Rizoiu. Are there any other Rizoius? Like are they geologists or lawyers or?
Yes, actually, there is a lawyer.
Okay.
There is a lawyer back in Eastern Europe. There's a lawyer with the same name. So if you find the lawyer, that's not
you.
me.
But the one at the University of Sydney, R-I-Z or Z-O-I-U, that's you.
A simple web search, RIZOIU at UTS.
That'll get you.
And plus, I am on LinkedIn. I'm not on any of the other social media platforms.
Do you have students as well for PhDs?
Yes.
So people can come and work with you.
I actually have a mid-size research lab with PhD students, postdocs. We do quite a lot of work in both theoretical and applied aspects of misinformation and disinformation. On the theoretical level, what we do is we build models that estimate how information travels social systems, mathematical models. And then we answering questions such as what will be viral, what will be popular, and then linking it to likely outcomes of consumption.
And that's what we'll go into in our next episode, the Manosphere pipeline. Thank you very much, Dr. Andrei.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Shirtloads of Science is washed, spun and aired by the University of Sydney.